My rich grandmother saw me and my 6-year-old daughter at a shelter. She asked, "Why aren't you in your house on Hawthorne Street?" I was speechless. What house? 3 days later, at a family gathering, my parents turned white. If you've never tried to get a 6-year-old ready for school while living in a family shelter, let me paint you a picture. It's like running a small, chaotic airport where every single passenger is an emotional time bomb. The security line is made of pure, unadulterated shame, and you're doing it all with one sock missing. That morning, it was Leia's sock. "Mom," she whispered, her voice tiny and sweet, the way kids speak when they're trying to hold you together. "It's okay. I can wear different socks." She held them up, one bright pink, covered in unicorns, and one white sock that had seen better days, a ghost of its former crispness. I stared at them like they were evidence at a crime scene. "It's a bold fashion choice," I managed, trying to sound normal. "Very, I do what I want of you." Leia smiled, her entire face lighting up, and for half a precious second, I forgot where we were. Then the heavy shelter door opened behind us, and the unforgiving winter air slapped me back to reality. Outside St. Bridge Family Shelter, 6:12 a.m. The sky was a bruised, brutal gray. The sidewalk, slick with damp. The air had that metallic, scrub-too-hard winter smell, sharp and clean, cutting right through me. Leia adjusted her backpack, which was practically bigger than she was, pulling at her small frame. I tugged the zipper of her puffy coat up to her chin, forcing myself not to look at the sign above the entrance. Family shelter. It wasn't the word shelter that twisted my gut. It was family, like we were a category, a label on a cardboard box, ready to be moved. "Okay," I said, injecting a false, brittle brightness into my voice. "School bus in 5 minutes." Leia nodded. She was so brave, quietly, fiercely brave, and it made me want to collapse with both pride and a crushing wave of guilt. Then she asked, softly, her eyes on her worn sneakers, "Do I still have to say our address when Mrs. Cole asks?" My stomach clenched, so tight it ached. "I don't think she'll ask today, sweetheart." I lied. Leia didn't push. She just looked down, then back up at me, as if memorizing my face, checking if I was still me. "Mom," she whispered, "are we going to move again?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The truth would have shattered her. The lie would have shattered me. And that's when it happened. A sleek black sedan, impossibly out of place, slid to the curb as if it owned the street. Not a taxi, not an Uber. No car like that ever pulled up to St. Bridge unless it had made a very, very wrong turn. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored coat the color of midnight. Evelyn Hart, my grandmother. I hadn't seen her in over a year. My life was now split into a stark before and after, and she belonged firmly in the before. She looked exactly as she always did, composed, elegant, and yes, terrifying. Not in a cruel way, but in an "I once ended a boardroom argument by raising one eyebrow" kind of way. Her gaze landed on me first, a flicker of recognition, then confusion. Then it found Leia. Something shifted in her face, quick and sharp. A tiny crack in glass. Her eyes darted to the shelter sign above us, then back to me. "Maya," she said, my name a foreign sound on her tongue, like she hadn't spoken it aloud in years. "What are you doing here?" My first instinct, a reflex born of exhaustion and shame, was to lie. Not because I thought she'd judge me. Evelyn rarely judged. She simply assessed, but because I couldn't bear to be seen like this. "I'm fine," I chirped, the default lie of every exhausted woman everywhere. "We're okay. It's temporary." Evelyn's eyes flicked to Leia's mismatched socks, then to my hands, red and raw from too much sanitizer, too much cold, too much life. Her voice dropped, quieter now, more dangerous. "Maya," she repeated, her gaze pinning me. "Why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" The world tilted. "My what?" I blinked. She didn't repeat herself as if I were stupid. She repeated herself as if I might faint. "The house," she enunciated, "on Hawthorne Street." My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate bird trapped inside my chest. "What house?" I heard myself ask, barely a whisper. "I don't have a house." Evelyn stared at me, as if I'd spoken a foreign language. I could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes. Timelines, possibilities, lies. Leia tugged my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "do we have a house?" I looked down at her, her eyes wide, hopeful in a way that truly hurt. I swallowed hard. "No, honey," I said gently. "We don't." Evelyn's face went utterly still. When my grandmother went still, it usually meant something was about to break. She stepped closer, not to me, but to Leia. Then, to my utter shock, she crouched down. Evelyn Hart did not crouch. She sat in chairs that cost more than my monthly income and made everyone else adjust to her. But there she was, lowering herself to my daughter's eye level. "You're Leia, right?" she asked. "Yes," Leia whispered shyly. Evelyn's expression softened, just a fraction. "That's a beautiful name." Then her eyes lifted to mine, sharp once more. "Get in the car," she commanded. I blinked. "Grandma, get in the car," she repeated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. A rush of heat flooded my face. Anger, embarrassment, a flicker of bewildered relief. It was all tangled up. Evelyn opened the back door of the sedan. I hesitated. Leia looked up at me. "Mom," she said, small and steady. "It's okay." The fact that my 6-year-old was comforting me was the final, devastating straw. I nodded. "Okay." Leia climbed in first, clutching her oversized backpack, and I slid in beside her, still half expecting someone to tap my shoulder and tell me this was all a misunderstanding. The door shut with a heavy thud, and the silence inside felt expensive. Evelyn didn't drive immediately. She just sat there, both hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Then very calmly she spoke. "By tonight," she said, "I will know who did this." My stomach flipped. She turned her head to look at me, her gaze piercing. I swallowed hard. "Grandma, I don't understand." "No," she said, "you don't. And that tells me everything." She pulled out her phone, tapped once, and said, "Call Adam." A man answered quickly. "Miss Hart, this is Evelyn," she said. "Get the property manager for Hawthorne Street on the line. I want a simple answer. Who has the keys? Who is living there? And whether anyone has been collecting money off it." My blood ran ice cold. "Money?" I stared at her profile, at the sharp set of her jaw, at the calm, almost casual way she spoke those words, like she was ordering coffee. And I realized this wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. I was standing on the precipice of something much, much darker. 6 months earlier, if you'd told me I'd be living in a shelter with my daughter, I would have laughed. Not because I thought it was impossible for others, but because I truly believed it couldn't happen to me. That's a dangerous kind of arrogance, by the way. It doesn't protect you. It just makes the fall louder. Back then, I was a nursing assistant at St. Jude's Medical Center. 12-hour shifts, call lights blinking like a frantic slot machine, people constantly asking me for things I didn't have. Time, answers, miracles. I was exhausted, yes, but I was surviving. And then I moved in with my parents. It was supposed to be temporary. It always starts with temporary. My dad, Robert, had that calm, reasonable voice that people automatically trust. My mom, Diane, had that soft smile that made her sound like she was doing you a favor, even when she was slowly, methodically cutting you off at the knees. These days, I call them by their first names. Mom and Dad just didn't fit anymore. "You can stay with us until you get back on your feet," Diane had cooed. Leia needs stability. Family supports family. I should have heard the fine print, the hidden conditions coiled within that sentence. But I didn't. At first, it was tolerable. Their apartment was small, but we made it work. Leia slept in my old bedroom. I worked my tail off, paid what I could, and kept my head down. Then the comments started. Not big, obvious attacks. No, these were smaller, insidious jabs. The kind that don't look like cruelty if you try to explain them to someone later. "You're always tired," Diane would sigh. "Maybe you should organize your life better." Robert would clear his throat pointedly when Leia's toys were on the floor. "We're just trying to keep the place nice." And then one night, after a double shift where my feet ached and my brain felt like static, Diane sat at the kitchen table, her expression grave, like she was about to deliver a medical diagnosis. "We need to talk," she said. I already knew that tone. "We think it's time you became independent," she continued softly. "You've been here long enough." "I'm trying," I said, forcing my voice to remain even. "Rents are high, deposits." "You're a mother, Maya," Diane interrupted, her eyes cold. "If you're a good mother, you'll figure it out." The words hit me with such force. I actually looked around, as if someone else must have uttered them. Robert cleared his throat. 30 days. That's reasonable. We're not monsters. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but screaming never helped in that apartment. It just gave them more ammunition later. So I nodded. Okay, I tried. Oh God, I tried. I scrolled through listings on my phone during my hospital breaks, my thumb numb from swiping, gulping down lukewarm cafeteria coffee. I called every place I could find, only to hear the same refrain. First and last month, deposit, proof of income, credit check. Sorry, we chose another applicant. Every day felt like I was running uphill with Leia strapped to my back, losing ground with every step. And then came the night they decided 30 days was merely a suggestion. I got home after a late shift. I'd spent hours helping a confused elderly man back to bed 3 times, cleaning up a spilled tray, and holding a crying woman's hand because she was terrified of surgery. It was past midnight. The hallway light outside my parents' apartment was on. My stomach clenched instantly. 2 cardboard boxes sat outside the door. My boxes. I stared at them, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder. Finally, the door cracked open. Diane's face appeared, unnervingly calm, as if this were a normal Tuesday. You need to keep your voice down, she whispered, sharp as a knife. Neighbors, why are my things outside? I demanded, my voice shaking. Robert's bored tone drifted from behind her. We told you, Maya. Independence. It hasn't been 30 days. I protested, my voice cracking. Diane's expression hardened, just slightly. Plans change. I glanced past her shoulder into the entryway. There, curled on the floor beside the shoe rack, was Leia, her little jacket folded under her head like a pillow, half asleep, shoes still on. They'd clearly put her there hours ago, waiting for me to scoop her up and disappear without waking the whole apartment. Where are we supposed to go? I hissed, desperation thick in my throat. Diane's smile returned, thin and disturbingly satisfied. You'll figure it out. You always do. And then, as if she were granting me a great kindness, she added, don't make a scene. I stood there in the hallway, the air buzzing in my ears, my world imploding. I stepped inside just long enough to crouch, gently slide my arms under Leia. She made a tiny sleepy sound and automatically wrapped herself around my neck. As I backed out, Diane's hand was already on the door. It closed with a soft click, sealing us out. Leia stirred. Mom, she mumbled. It's okay. I lied automatically. We're having a sleepover. I shoved the boxes into my car and drove. I don't remember much of that night. Just the blur of streetlights, the way my hands shook on the steering wheel, and Leia asleep across the back seat, her small body curled like a silent question mark. Over and over, I thought, how did this happen? The next day, I tried to fix it, because that's what I do. I wipe down messes. I lift people who can't lift themselves. I called Diane. No answer. I called Robert. He answered once. We're doing this because we love you, he said, like he was reading from a script. Tough love. Then he hung up. I went to work anyway because the rent I didn't have wasn't going to pay itself. By day 3, my cheeks were hollow from stress, my stomach gnawing from cheap gas station food. I tried a motel. 1 night. 2. Then the money ran out. A school counselor noticed Leia was quiet, asked if everything was okay. I lied. Then the counselor asked again, gently, and I saw Leia watching me, her big eyes absorbing how to lie to survive. So I told the truth. And 2 days later, I was filling out shelter intake forms while Leia sat beside me, swinging her legs, blissfully unaware of the gravity of the situation. The intake worker was kind, but tired, like she'd seen too much. We need your information, she said. Where did you stay last night? In my car, I replied. She just nodded, checking a box. Leia leaned in, whispering too loudly, is this our house now? The woman flinched. I forced a smile. No, I said quickly. No, sweetheart. I wanted to add this is temporary, but the word tasted like a sick joke. That night, Leia fell asleep on a narrow bed beside me, in a room that smelled of bleach and overcooked food. I lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of other families through thin walls, coughing, babies crying, someone whispering, it's okay, over and over, like a desperate prayer. My phone lay heavy in my hand. I thought about calling my grandmother. Evelyn Hart wasn't the kind of woman you called to cry. She was the kind of woman you called when you needed a problem solved. But my mother had spent years training me not to bother her. Your grandmother hates drama, Diane always said. She doesn't like weakness. Don't embarrass yourself. And when I texted Diane after the lockout, asking if Evelyn knew what was happening, Her response was instant. Grandma is overseas. She's busy. Don't drag her into this. It was incredible how fast my mother could answer a text when she wanted something. So I didn't call. I told myself I'd handle it. I told myself I didn't want to look pathetic. I told myself a lot of things. And then, on that cold winter morning, my grandmother stepped out of a black sedan outside a shelter and asked me why I wasn't living in my house on Hawthorne Street. That's when I finally understood. I didn't just have a housing problem. I had a family problem, and someone had been lying for a very, very long time. By the way, if you're still listening to this wild ride, and trust me, it only gets crazier, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Back in the sedan, Evelyn's first call was already in progress. I couldn't hear the other voice. Only Evelyn's side, sharp enough to cut glass. Who signed for the keys? A beat of tense silence. And the house is occupied. My stomach plummeted. Evelyn didn't react like someone surprised. She reacted like someone whose suspicions were just confirmed. Send the file to Adam, she said. Everything. She ended the call and finally looked at me, not with pity, but with grim certainty. My thumbs, still shaking, typed a text to Leia's school. Family emergency. Leia won't be in today. No explanation. No long, humiliating essay. Just the smallest, most honest package of truth I could manage. Evelyn drove to a diner 10 minutes away. The kind of place with warm, steamy windows, a bell that jingled on the door, and menus that smelled faintly of syrup. Inside, the heater blasted my face, and I almost cried from the sheer shock of being warm. We slid into a booth. Leia immediately found the kids' menu and started coloring a cartoon pancake like it had personally insulted her. Evelyn, without asking, ordered hot chocolate for Leia. I watched her, and a strange wave of anger washed over me. Not at Evelyn, but at the universe. At my parents, because it was that easy to be kind. And my parents had chosen everything else. Evelyn lifted her phone again. Grandma. I started, then stopped. I had no idea what to even ask. What house? Why are you here? How did my life become a shelter sign? Evelyn didn't answer my questions in the order my panic demanded. She just said calmly, I'm going to make another call. You will listen and you will not interrupt. I nodded. It was the kind of nod you give a surgeon when you're on the operating table. She tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker. One ring. Two. Then, my mother's voice. Diane. Bright and saccharine sweet, like she was auditioning for the role of loving parent in a community theater production. Evelyn. Oh, my goodness. What a surprise. How are you? Evelyn's tone stayed pleasant, almost gentle. I was thinking about Maya, she said. How is she doing? My stomach dropped into my shoes. There was a microsecond of silence, that tiny pause where a liar decides which version of reality is most useful. Then Diane answered smoothly, confidently, as if she'd been practicing the sentence in front of a mirror. Oh, she's doing great, she chirped. She's living in the house. She's settled. She loves it. You know, Maya. She wanted space, so we didn't bother you. I stared at the sticky tabletop, wishing it would open up and swallow me whole. Across from me, Leia colored quietly, humming to herself. She didn't understand the words, but she understood tone. She glanced up once, saw my face, and went right back to coloring, harder, as if she could scribble the problem away. Diane kept talking, filling the silence with cheerful nonsense about how busy she'd been, how proud she was, how family is everything. Evelyn let her. Evelyn didn't rush liars. She gave them all the room they needed to hang themselves properly. Finally, Evelyn said, That's good to hear, and ended the call. Just like that. No confrontation. No accusation. No gotcha. My throat tightened. That wasn't confusion. I rasped, letting out a laugh that sounded more like a cough. She knew. She knew the whole time. Evelyn's eyes stayed on mine, steady and sharp. She knew enough to lie without thinking, she said. That tells me what I need to know. Leia slid her purple pancaked coloring page toward me. Mom, look, I made the pancake purple. I forced a smile, so quickly it probably looked painful. Wow, I said. That pancake is incredibly brave. Leia giggled, and for half a second, my chest unclenched. Then Evelyn leaned in, lowered her voice, and said the simple sentence I should have heard months ago. I arranged a house for you, she said, on Hawthorne Street. Your parents were supposed to manage the handoff. Keys, move-in, all of it. They told me it was done. My brain tried to process it. A house. For us. And my parents had been living their lives like that sentence didn't even exist. I gripped the edge of the booth until my knuckles went white. Why wouldn't you tell me directly? I heard myself ask, and immediately felt stupid. like I was blaming the only person who had actually shown up. Evelyn didn't flinch. "Because I trusted your parents," she said. "Which was my mistake, not yours." Then she stood up, walked a few steps away so Leia couldn't hear, and made 2 more quick calls. Low voice, clipped, efficient. "I only caught fragments. Hawthorne file, clean summary, key log, listing history, tenant payments. Yes, today." When she came back, she didn't sit down like she planned to linger. She sat down like she planned to move mountains. "You're not going back to that shelter," she said. My pride tried to stand up and argue. My sheer, utter exhaustion shoved it back down. "Okay," I whispered, the most honest word I'd said all day. An hour later, Leia was bouncing on a hotel bed like it was a trampoline, utterly convinced the world had never been cruel. She found the little complimentary soap, sniffed it dramatically, and announced it smelled like a fancy grandma. Evelyn stood by the window, phone in hand, watching traffic, like she was observing a battlefield. She didn't tell me everything. She didn't have to. The point wasn't details yet. The point was that something was happening, something I didn't have to carry alone anymore. That night, after Leia finally fell asleep in clean, soft sheets, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Evelyn sat at the small table by the window. Finally, she spoke again. "Your parents are hosting an event," she said. "Important to them. A venue, relatives, speeches, the whole performance." My stomach tightened. "When?" I asked. Evelyn's gaze remained fixed on the city lights. "Soon," she said. "And we'll be there." She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a decision already made. 3 days later, I stood in the hotel bathroom, staring at my reflection. I looked like a version of myself that had been put through a washer cycle and hung up to dry in a storm. Evelyn had insisted I buy a dress. Not an expensive one, just a clean, simple one. "You don't need armor," she'd said. "You need dignity." I wasn't sure dignity came in polyester, but I appreciated the sentiment. Leia wore a little blue dress and tights. She twirled once in the hotel room, a bright splash of color. "I look like a princess," she exclaimed. "You do," I said, my throat tightening. On the ride over, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might vomit. "What if I freeze?" I asked quietly. Evelyn didn't look at me. "Then I'll speak." "What if they deny everything?" "They will," Evelyn said flatly. "What if everyone thinks I didn't even have a word for it?" Evelyn glanced at me then, her gaze sharp but steady. "Maya," she said, "you've survived worse than a room full of liars." The car pulled up to a venue I'd never have picked in my life. One of those hotel event spaces with soft lighting and hard, artificial smiles. The sign by the entrance read, "Hart Collins Family Dinner." Of course it did. My mother loved an event, not because she liked people, but because she loved witnesses. Inside, a sea of relatives I hadn't seen in months. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people with opinions and casseroles. Except here, the casseroles had been replaced by catered hors d'oeuvres, served on trays like tiny edible bribes. At the far end of the room, a projector screen stood ready, a microphone on a stand, because my mother couldn't serve dinner without also serving a narrative. Before we went in, Evelyn stopped at a side door and spoke briefly to a staff member. A woman nodded and opened a small, private room next to the banquet hall, quiet, warm, stocked with water bottles and crackers. "This is for Leia," Evelyn said. "She doesn't need to be in the center of this." Leia took one cautious step into the room, then looked up at Evelyn. "Seriously, do I get snacks?" "Yes," Evelyn replied. "Good ones." Leia accepted that like it was legally binding. A trusted assistant stayed with her. Leia waved at me, completely unaware she was being protected from the family apocalypse. Then Evelyn looked at me. "You go in first," she said. I knew what she was doing. Let them see me before they saw her. Let them panic in silence. I walked into the banquet room alone. The chatter softened, then resumed, the way people do when they sense something but don't want to be the first to acknowledge it. Then Diane saw me. Her smile appeared automatically, then glitched, like a bad Wi-Fi connection. Her eyes flicked over my simple dress, my posture, the fact that I wasn't wearing "I'm drowning" on my face anymore. Her hands tightened slightly around her wine glass. Robert noticed a second later, his laugh dying halfway through, his jaw clenching like he was biting down on a dangerous thought. Neither of them moved toward me. They didn't ask where I'd been. They didn't ask how Leia was. They did what people do when they're trying to calculate danger. They smiled, and they waited. I stood near the edge of the room, letting the silence do its work. Dry humor is sometimes the only thing that keeps you from screaming. So I let myself have one thought. Look at us. A family dinner. The kind where everyone pretends the most important thing is the seating arrangement. A minute later, the room temperature changed. Evelyn Hart entered, calm, unhurried, completely in control. Beside her was a man with a slim folder and a laptop bag. The kind of person who looked like he'd never raised his voice in his life, because he simply didn't need to. Diane went pale. Not, "Oh, you surprised me," pale. More like, "I just realized my entire plan has a gaping, fatal hole in it," pale. Robert straightened his shoulders, the way he always did when he wanted to look like the victim before anyone had even accused him. Evelyn nodded to a few relatives, as if she were simply attending a dinner party. Then she looked at my mother. "Diane," Evelyn said lightly, "before we eat, I'd like to clear up something you told me." My mother's smile tightened, plastered on. "Of course, Mom." Evelyn's voice stayed calm, almost conversational. "You told me Maya was living in the house on Hawthorne Street," she said. The room quieted. Not because everyone suddenly cared about Hawthorne Street, but because everyone suddenly cared about Diane's face. Diane's eyes darted around. She set her glass down, as if it had become too heavy. "Well," she stammered, laughing too fast. "Yes, she." Evelyn held up a hand. "Let's not do this with guessing," Evelyn said. "Let's do it with facts." She nodded to the man with the laptop. He stepped forward and plugged into the venue's projector, like he'd done it 1,000 times. The first slide appeared. Hawthorne Street. Summary. A murmur ran through the room. Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Evelyn didn't speak like she was giving a courtroom speech. She spoke like she was reading the weather forecast. "This house was arranged for Maya and Leah," she said, and the screen showed a simple line to match. Next slide. "Keys released to Diane Hart Collins, July." Evelyn let that sit for half a second. Then another slide. A listing screenshot. The Hawthorne house, marketed as a furnished rental. Photos of the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. People leaned forward. Diane's hands started to shake. Next, a lease summary. Names blurred. Dates visible. Tenants moved in. August. And then the slide that made the entire room go dead quiet. A payment instruction page from the property manager file. Rent payout account provided by Diane and Robert. Evelyn's voice never rose. "Diane," she said, looking around the room, making sure everyone heard. "You didn't just take the keys. You rented out the home meant for my granddaughter and my great-granddaughter, and you had the rent sent to an account you controlled." Robert snapped first, loud, trying to reclaim the room. "This is inappropriate," he barked. "This is a family event." Evelyn turned her gaze to him. "Yes," she said. "That's precisely why I'm doing it here." Diane found her voice, thin and frantic. "We were going to tell her," she sobbed, tears finally real. "It was temporary. We need it." "Temporary," Evelyn repeated, her eyes flicking toward the side room where Leah was, unseen but ever present. "You displaced a child," Evelyn said, and the room went utterly still. She paused just long enough, then finished the sentence. "For profit." Someone gasped. Someone whispered, "You've got to be kidding." Diane started to cry openly. "We had debts," she wailed. "You don't understand." Evelyn's expression didn't change. "I understand enough," she said, "and I'm done funding your choices." She turned slightly so everyone could hear and said simply, "Starting now, Diane and Robert receive nothing from me. No more help. No more transfers, no inheritance." Robert's face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "You can't." "I can," Evelyn said, "and I already did." The man with the folder stepped forward, calm as ever. "Diane Collins, Robert Collins," he said politely. "These documents are for you." A uniformed officer stood nearby. Not dramatic, not aggressive, just present. Because Evelyn didn't gamble with scenes like this. Diane stared at the papers as if they were radioactive. Robert took them with shaking hands, then looked around the room and finally understood the worst part. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a reputation collapsing in public. Evelyn's voice stayed level. "You will not contact Maya," she said. "You will cooperate, and you will answer for what you did." Diane turned to me then, eyes wild, pleading. "Maya," she begged, "tell her to stop. We're family." Something inside me went cold and clear, like ice water. "You should have remembered that," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady, "before you made a business out of my daughter's home." Diane's face crumpled. I didn't feel joy exactly. I felt relief. Profound. aching relief. Relief that the truth was finally out loud. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Relief that Leia would never have to learn how to smile through humiliation the way I had. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I walked out of the banquet room, down the hallway, and opened the door to the private room. Leia looked up, cheeks full of crackers. "Mom, are we done?" I crouched and hugged her so tight she squeaked. "Yeah," I whispered. "We're done." She leaned back and looked at my face carefully, checking for storms. Then she asked softly, "Can we go home?" I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said. "We can." Evelyn met us in the hallway. She didn't look back at the room. She didn't need to. In the car, Leia leaned against my shoulder and fell asleep. I stared out the window, my hand still trembling slightly. "Grandma," I whispered, "what happens now?" Evelyn didn't take her eyes off the road. "Now," she said, her voice firm, "we take back what was meant for you." 6 months later, our life is boring. And it's the most beautiful kind of boring imaginable. We live on Hawthorne Street now. Leia has her own room, her own bright, cheerful curtains, and a crooked art gallery of drawings taped proudly to the wall. She walks to school like the world has always been safe, always been fair. That's the point. I'm still a nursing assistant, but now it's by choice, not because I'm stuck. I'm finishing my RN track, one step at a time, and for the first time in years, my energy goes into building a future, not just surviving the present. Evelyn never paid for my life. She showed up when it mattered most, and she made sure no one could ever intercept help again. On Sunday mornings, she visits with pastries, pretending she's only here to see Leia. Leia, ever observant, doesn't buy it. "Grandma Evelyn," she'll ask, her eyes twinkling, "do you like our house?" Evelyn always pauses, like she's swallowing something heavy and profound. Then she says, "Yes, I do." As for Diane and Robert, well, it turns out you can't rent out someone else's home, pocket the money, and still call it family. The rent they took didn't stay free. They were forced to repay it, and the investigation that followed made their carefully cultivated, respectable image evaporate like smoke. Once Evelyn cut them off, their hidden debts showed up like roaches under a flipped light switch. People stopped inviting them to events. Calls stopped getting answered. My mother tried to contact me, not to apologize, but to negotiate. I blocked the number, because I'm done bargaining for basic decency. So, that's my story. It's been a long journey from that shelter door to the home we have now. Looking back, part of me still wonders, what would you have done in my place? Or has anyone ever betrayed your trust like this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found yourself rooting for us, please hit that subscribe button. There are more stories like this one that need to be told.